Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting held on the 7th of July 2020, and I'd like to welcome those watching live stream. We do have the gallery open today as well, but in the light of today's announcements from the state government, that will certainly change for the next 6 weeks of meetings. We'll start with item 1, the Statement of Acknowledgement. City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The Diversity Statement. The City of Casey is home to a remarkable diversity of cultures, languages, faiths, identities, landscapes and stories. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. These intersecting and overlapping community stories form Casey's collective identity and contribute to its evolving rich history. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Now move on to item 2, the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June 2020. Is there a mover and seconder?
I'll move those.
Move Mr Belmar.
Happy to second.
Seconded Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Declaration of interests, item 3. I've considered my obligations under section 79 of the Local Government Act and do not have a conflict of interest relevant to any of the agenda papers on this afternoon's meeting. I also note that no officers have declared conflicts in any of the reports. Do either of my fellow administrators have a conflict of interest to declare?
I have nothing to declare, Chair.
I have nothing to declare.
Thank you. I now move on to item 4, public question time, and there have been 7 public questions received for this afternoon's council meeting. The first question is from Shiral Fernando, and the subject is review of dogs off-lead policy, and the question is, when is the next dogs off-lead policy up for review? Can Casey follow all other local government areas and restrict the number of parks dogs can be allowed off-leash? There are more open spaces that allow dogs to be off-leash than spaces for families and kids to use without having to fear dogs that are off-leash and out of control. I have a response from the Manager of Safer Communities, and I will read through the response. The City of Casey has in effect an order made under section 26 of the Domestic Animals Act 1994 that imposes a condition on all dogs and their restraint within the municipality. All dogs are to be under effective control by a person by means of a chain, cord or leash at all times in any public place other than a council reserve. Whilst dogs are permitted to be off-lead in a council reserve, at no time shall a person allow a dog to cause a nuisance or annoyance to another person in a public place or reserve. Dogs are, however, required to be on a lead near children's play equipment and when there are organised sporting activities taking place in the reserves. In February 2020, the City of Casey conducted a review and audit of its 17 dedicated dog on-lead parks and reserves within the City of Casey to establish if those parks and reserves are still required to be dedicated as on-lead. The review involved public consultation, inspection and a review of complaints associated with dog nuisance at the reserves. The review concluded that the reserves should remain as dedicated on-lead reserves, and they were as follows, and I will read out the list for the benefit of the listeners. They're Melville Park Reserve, Timbertop Reserve, Buchanan Park and Wilson Botanic Park in Berwick, and in various locations throughout Cranbourne, Arleon Reserve, Hunt Club Lakes Reserve, Waverley Park and Lawless Reserve, McGuigan Reserve, Kevin Adlard Reserve in Doveton, and in Endeavour Hills, James Alexander Reserve and Sky Reserve, In Hallam, William Charles Reserve. In Hampton Park, James Wyman Reserve and Wycombe Ashford Reserve. And in various locations throughout Narre Warren, Ray Baston Reserve, Amber Crescent Reserve and Baringa Park Estate Reserve. We'll also note that the City Compliance Team regularly patrol Council's reserves to ensure responsible dog ownership. Complaints of nuisance should be made to the City Compliance Team, and their phone number is on the Council website, that being phone number 9705 5200. There's a further question from Sherelle Fernando, and that is the subject: management of spread of COVID-19 transmissions. The question is, what is Casey Council doing to control the spread of COVID-19 in the Casey local government area? There is no crowd control or social distancing adhered to in shopping centres and other public places. The responding manager is our pandemic coordinator, and Council has had a group of people who have met on some occasions daily, weekly, and liaised regularly with the Department of Health and Human Services. The Department of Health and Human Services of the Victorian State Government are the lead agency and ultimately responsible in controlling the spread of COVID-19 across Victoria under the current state of emergency and directions issued by Victoria's Chief Health Officer. Council is a support agency, so we have a limited role in this response, and as such will assist DHHS on request, and that has occurred on each and every occasion that we've been asked to assist, and also been very proactive outside of that in promoting the health messages and in ensuring that all of our staff that are continuing to provide services are adhering to that, both with themselves and with the clients that they're servicing. So Council is a support agency, and some of the recent assistance that we've provided has been, in just a few examples, Monash Health and DHHS in setting up a drive-through clinic at Casey Fields, which is a Council facility, support the Department of Health and Human Services in coordinating a base of operation for door knocking in Hallam and sharing information with members of the public, providing Environmental Health Officer food safety education visits to food donation and soup kitchen style businesses. It's important that if residents do have concerns on social distancing in shopping centres or in other public areas, they need to make contact with the COVID-19 hotline, which is run by the state government, and the phone number for that hotline is 1800 675 398. Directions in this regard are enforced by the Victoria Police and under the use of emergency powers by the Department of Health and Human Services and any authorised officers that they authorise to ensure compliance with those directions. And obviously we have a new state that we're dealing with, as announced by the Premier just this afternoon. So the diligence in managing social distancing and all of the health requests and requirements by the state government in this escalated state is increasingly important. So thank you for that question and the opportunity to convey the work that Council has been doing with respect to COVID-19. Question 3 is from Lynn Fernandez, and the subject is Council elections. Why is the City of Casey not required to hold council elections in August along with all other councils in Victoria, and therefore have no elected representatives until October 2024? The Local Government Casey City Council Bill 2020 was passed by Parliament in February of this year, and it confirms that the next general election of the City of Casey will be held in October 2024. Over the next 4 years, the Council for the City of Casey will comprise of the 3 administrators, myself, Mr Belmar and Mr Cameron, who've been appointed by the Minister for Local Government to replace the role of the Council for that period of time. Question 4 is from Mr Phil Kaiser, and the subject is inclusiveness of faith groups. And the question from Mr Kaiser is quite lengthy, but I will read it. After question time on the 16th of June 2020, I noted a question from Drew Gormley. Drew Gormley's question to the council meeting: it would also appear that reference to any faith groups and or activities have been removed from the council's website. Is this not the very essence of discrimination? The response came from Nolene Duff stating that she had checked the website herself and the officers confirmed nothing had been removed. I again checked with the search Church, Faith, Assembly, Religion, in parentheses, and can see that there is no evidence that any references are available via the Casey website for support to the residents of many years in the past. There was also reference made to a section under family and community to point people in the direction of religious faith groups. Again, no such section is available on the Casey website. The only reference I found was the offensive references I have many times reported from a City of Casey funded group stating spirituality transcends tribal religions. So my question is to the administrators and officers: why are the administrators and officers trying to mislead the residents of the City of Casey regarding the inclusiveness of faith groups within our great city? The City of, by way of response, the Manager of Connected Communities has outlined this response. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the richness and diversity of Casey's faith communities and the vital role of faith organisations in creating an inclusive and connected community for all residents. The reference cited in the question is not a council-funded program, but rather a community event listing. City of Casey website content is primarily reflective of council services and guided by our organisational commitments to inclusive practice as formalised in the Inclusive Casey Strategic Framework 2018-2021. Faith groups currently feature prominently on the community resources during the coronavirus pandemic page, reflecting ongoing partnerships with council and the vital support that faith organisations deliver. And as I did in response to the question that was raised, that's referred to, I have again this afternoon had a look at the Casey website, and I can confirm there's extensive resources that the various faith groups and local churches are contributing during the coronavirus, and they are listed in quite a lot of detail on our website, including contact details for all of those groups. And that's just one example where they have come forward and we've included that information and happily included that information, and we acknowledge the great contribution that those various groups are making in this community with respect to the state of emergency that we are in with COVID-19. So once again, I thank you for your question. Question 5 is from Margaret and Terry Eschleman, and the subject is the inclusiveness of faith communities. As new residents of the City of Casey and members of a faith community, my husband and I were disappointed to find there are no churches listed on your council website and that the prayer has been dropped from your meetings. Churches and the faith community in general are still an integral part of our society. When someone has a need, that is where people turn for help. This is particularly true at the moment in these COVID times. Come on, City of Casey, acknowledge us and list us on your Where to Go for Help pages. In response to that, Council acknowledges the work that faith communities play, and I think with respect to the last question I've outlined the extensive examples of the contribution that those communities are making to COVID-19, and the contact details for those groups and their activities are listed on our website. Council has also partnered with and provided funding for a range of faith organisations through our enhanced quick response community grants that were set up with respect to our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Faith organisations feature prominently, as I've outlined, and they have also been in receipt of a range of grants. So thank you for that question. The question 6, so we have 2 more questions. Question 6 is submitted by Brendan Brown, and the subject is rates waiver, and the question is: Monash Council is introducing a 10% waiver for ratepayers in 2021, while Dandenong Council is offering $100 and $200 waivers of rates for certain categories of ratepayers facing hardship. How will Casey Council look into the viability of such waivers and how similar waivers could be introduced here? And in response, the City of Casey's 2020 budget settings comply with the state government's 2% rate cap in 2021. We appreciate that this is a very challenging time and that many in our community are experiencing hardship. And I did inquire with our Chief Financial Officer this afternoon as to the number of our residents who have approached Council and been assisted with respect to arrangements to defer rates or enter payment agreements. And that's in excess of 2,000 residents that Council officers have engaged with individually and agreed payment plans. Where possible, we are providing that flexibility that I've just outlined to affected customers, and once again encourage anybody who is unable to meet their payment due dates to get in touch with us as soon as possible to make arrangements and discuss potential relief options. At this time, the City of Casey has provided hardship relief in the form of freezes on interest on outstanding rates from the 1st of March 2020 to the 30th of September 2020, and decided not to pursue legal action on outstanding rates until October, and that will be reviewed. Question 7 is also from Brendan Brown, and the subject is spending on the arts. Casey's budgeted net spending on the arts of $4.25 million this financial year has been staunchly defended. Will Council commit to quarterly reports on this expenditure to assure the public this money is being spent on the arts in a way that is beneficial to the local community? And in response to that, the City of Casey tables quarterly community reports that are part of the Council meeting and public reports. And the latest one in March of this year can be found on Casey's website under the agenda for the Council meeting of the 19th of May 2020. This quarterly information includes progress reports on actions committed by Council in its Council Action Plan, which includes Strategy 2.1, the destination for arts, culture, sport and leisure that attracts visitors and brings communities together, and full financial statements of all Council capital and operating expenditure. Officers have further responded and said they will ensure that future quarterly community reports highlight the benefits that the City Arts Program provides the community, consistent with Council's strategic commitment that facilities and programs which we deliver opportunities for community participation in arts, cultural events, sport and leisure. Additionally, annual financial results are confirmed by the City of Casey's annual reports, with forecast updates included in our annual budget and strategic resource plan documents, again which Council adopted at the last meeting and are available in full on our website. Council further provides requested information in response to questions, and our commitment is one of transparency in the reporting of such critical information, particularly the demonstration of service delivery outcomes and responsible financial management. And I do also note that in the statewide community survey independently conducted by the Office of Local Government, that both arts and library services are the highest ranked services of every service provided by councils right across the state, and that is consistently represented also in Casey's community survey results, which we will receive very shortly. Thank you for all of those questions. I now move on to officer reports, and that's item 5.1, which is the Casey Cardinia Libraries Library Plan, Strategic Resource Plan and Draft Budget. Do I have someone to move that report?
Oh, I'm happy to move that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And seconder?
I second that.
Mr. Belmar, would you like to speak to the report?
I will make some brief comments. Thank you, Chair. It's almost surreal considering the announcement this afternoon that we are looking at the future of the municipal libraries, which have over time not just had a requirement to adapt their business models, insofar as what's happened over the last few months, that there's been nearly 5,800 parcels made up about 56,500 items to 400 members dispatched to help the municipality with information flows and resource management during these times, but we're about to move into even a more difficult period, which undoubtedly will have a significant impact upon the resources of the libraries and its business model and how it tailors its resources to meet future demand. It has to be noted that this is not an insignificant commitment from this city and from a neighbouring shire, Cardinia, that the operating expenditure for the municipal libraries exceeds $12 million for the next financial year and employs directly 98 staff. And I would like to place on the record, and I'm sure this is shared by my co-administrator, our appreciation to the Chair, Noeline Duff, who also chairs the Libraries Board, that has been instrumental in ensuring that the right level of governance and accountability and transparency in the preparation of the plan and its accounts is foremost of its consideration. But there is over 127,000 members who have taken up the opportunity to be involved in the municipal libraries, which on a very rough estimate I think is about 1 in 7 of the combined municipal populations, which I would suspect would be an incredibly high average, and shows that these services are not only being recognised as valuable but are being utilised. And from a personal note, having recently inspected in quite a bit of depth the facility here at Bunjil Place, and also being privy to inspecting a number of facilities both nationally and internationally, I can say without any hesitation it is absolutely a world-class facility, not just as a library but as a community resource. And there is undoubtedly going to be disappointment from those people that visit, the hundreds if not thousands of people who visit that facility normally on a daily basis, to not have access to it. And the centrality of it and the focus that it can give to providing a hub for social activities, community groups, etc., is undoubtedly going to be missed over the next 6 weeks. And I do look forward to visiting the other facilities in Cranbourne, Doveton and Dever Hills, Hampton Park, and also the neighbouring facilities in Cardinia, and to ensure that we are doing the right thing by the community by providing up-to-date resources, ensuring there's adaptability in the business plan, and that we are meeting the community's expectation. So this plan has been prepared with all of those considerations at its heart. It has been widely distributed digitally and through the relevant community groups, and I, upon review, are fully supportive of it and commend it for consideration by the administrators.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you. In seconding this motion and noting the news that we've had today, which will unfortunately impact the ability of the community to physically use the library, I note the comments of my co-administrator, Mr Boardman, that the library continues to function and that much of its collection is out on loan, and that shows as well the opportunities that are taken up by council staffing, offering different kinds of services when an opportunity or a challenge arises. I take heart today, given the news, with the projections for the future of the library, its future growth both in memberships and in visits, and I look forward to those being achieved in the future when we're able to offer the service in its more usual manner. I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And as Mr Boardman referenced, I am currently until November, the chair of the Library Board, and I do want to acknowledge the extensive work that they have done in managing services to the community throughout COVID-19. Chris Buckingham, the Chief Executive Officer, and his team have been amazingly resilient in the work that they've done, and have been in a position to be able to rethink how they provide services, as referenced by Mr Boardman in his moving notes. I think it's a service that, as I referenced earlier, is one of the most highly valued services across the municipality, and one that clearly the City of Casey supports. So just a few comments. So I put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.2, the Victorian Government Stimulus Funding Programs. Do I have a mover?
I'm happy to move that.
Mr Belmar, seconded. Mr Boardman? Mr Belmar.
Thank you. This is a program by which Council is seeking applying for funding for 5 projects that it's identified within the municipality. I note that they are in a number of locations, including the Clyde Recreation Reserve, Botanic Ridge, Strong Drive Children's Centre, Arona Community Place and Olive Road Sporting Complex. The other thing I note from reviewing the material is the wide variety of offerings that the stimulus funding will assist across different council services, not just sport. And it's important that council take the opportunity, as it's doing in this particular case, to avail itself of opportunities for funding from a program like the stimulus funding model. And I commend the motion.
Thank you. Mr Boardman.
Only to endorse Mr Belmar's comments and to perhaps suggest that under the current environment, this will be the first of, I think, of a number of applications that this municipality will put into the state government and also to the federal government along similar lines. So I fully endorse the report.
Thank you. Just a very brief comment, and obviously this places a commitment on council to also commit funding to a number of programs, and we do appeal to our local members to offer their support. I know that they do with respect to these applications, so we look forward to some positive outcomes and being able to provide the expanded services to the community should we be successful. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.3, and for those of you that are watching, we're up to page 68 on the agenda. And item 5.3 is the 2021 Community Grants Panel recommendations. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
I'm happy to move that.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Seconded? Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
It's, again, very interesting in the current environment that we do have some positive news and some pleasing announcements this afternoon around the 2020-21 Community Grants Program. And equally pleasing that 83% of all applicants were either fully or partially funded, so 101 of the 121 eligible applications to receive $415,750 from the grant pool. What is interesting about these projects is the diversity, and if we have a look on page 71 to 73 around those that have been successful, and then of course the commentary. These type of projects range from community groups to religious groups to RSLs to sporting associations to senior citizens groups to scout groups to neighbourhood watch centres, life-saving and other community facilities. It really is a representation of the diversity of what exists in this municipality from community and other support services, and also some of those facilities that are going to be beneficiaries of capital works and other upgrades to provide much better ongoing facilities to the community commensurately. I do note that this has been a rigorous and very independent process. And it's one thing as administrator that we need to note quite earnestly is that we were not involved in any of the consideration of any of these programs. We were not part of the assessment panel. It was absolutely and utterly at arm's length, and that the fairness and equity and the robustness of the process was exactly that, and one that we have complete confidence in. There will be disappointment to some applicants. There are a number of applications that were unsuccessful, primarily because they didn't meet the criteria or that their application was incomplete. And we note on page 83 that there was some that were for equipment that was ineligible, there was one for loan payments, and there was other for operational costs and to provide free advertising that were ineligible because of the funding requirements. There were other applications that didn't receive 100% of what their expectation and what their application was, primarily because of the equity and the fairness that was applied through the process to ensure that as many of these projects were funded as possible, so that we could be as representative and as extensive to the community as we possibly could. It does give an interesting precedent to what will happen in the future, and we've been having discussions around future funding activities that this council will undertake, and the process that we will ensure that will be independent and at arm's length, and will provide again that fairness and that equity to those that potentially want to participate and be beneficiaries of this. But it also represents that where we are, that we probably need to look at extending the criteria to perhaps support in different ways some of those community support organisations that are going to be providing a much more extensive and perhaps a more significantly demand on their services over the forthcoming weeks and months. So it's with those brief comments, Chair, that I would like to acknowledge the assessment panel. I'd like to acknowledge the council officers for how robust and how fair they have been and how diligent they have been in resulting at this recommendation, and also to congratulate the applicants, to thank the applicants themselves for participating, and to ensure that they benefit accordingly from the grants that will be forthcoming in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Mr Belmar.
Thank you. Like Mr Boardman, I want to congratulate those organisations that have been successful. I am also very impressed by the independent assessment process that occurred, and can confirm that as an administrator I played no role in selecting who would achieve a grant, and that was done independently by an independent panel that was appointed by council. What I also would like to note, importantly, is that there were organisations that were unsuccessful, and what I'm sure we will do is we encourage them to continue to, in the future, seek grants. Council has a program by which it will assist in the writing of applications. So I encourage any organisation that's been unsuccessful to, in the future, continue to engage with Council and continue to avail itself of the opportunities presented by programs such as this. And I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And I join with my colleagues in supporting the recommendation, but also in commenting on the great diversity of organisations that the Council has been able to support. And with reference to two of our earlier questions this afternoon, there's quite a wide range of faith communities and churches that are represented in the grants program, which is fantastic, and we know that they're doing some great work out in the community. But there's also tremendous cultural diversity amongst the groups, and just general activity diversity as well. So I think it's a great program. As outlined, thanks again to the Grants Assessment Panel, members of our community that I know spent considerable hours working through and assessing the many, many applications, as you can see. So thank you. So I put that recommendation to the vote. Item 5.3, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 6, consideration of reports of committees. I note the record of assembly of councillors as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions. There are no petitions received for this council meeting. Item 8, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. And before I close the council meeting tonight, I have been remiss in not acknowledging the officers present, most notably our Chief Executive Officer, Glenn Patterson. So I welcome you belatedly, Mr Patterson. And also we're joined this afternoon by James Collins, who's the Director of City Planning and Infrastructure, and Steve Coldham, who's the Director of Community Life. And we probably won't see them again for a number of weeks given the restrictions, but thank you for your support and the support of our support officers Jacinta and Jordan, who've assisted the meetings this afternoon. So item 9 is to close the council meeting. I declare the meeting closed and thank those of you who have been watching live stream. And just again, a reminder to, on behalf of our community, to adhere to all of the required restrictions over the next 6 weeks, as challenging as it is for all of us, to really adhere to those most closely, even more than before, so that as a state and as a community we can move forward before the year is out. So please think about that very carefully. And thank you for your attendance this afternoon. Good afternoon.